Flight 892 carried 180 passengers when both engines failed at 39,000 feet. The pilots were losing control fast. Then a quiet woman in seat 24F stood up to help. When F-22 fighter jets arrived, they couldn't believe it. The passenger saving everyone was the legendary pilot called Phoenix. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Flight 892 was packed with 180 passengers on the sunny morning of June 22, 2024, as the massive Airbus A330 prepared for takeoff from Los Angeles International Airport bound for Miami International Airport. The wide-body aircraft, with its twin Rolls-Royce engines, represented the perfect choice for the busy cross-country route that would take nearly 5 hours to complete. Captain Robert Sterling, a 20-year veteran with over 15,000 flight hours, completed his final checks while First Officer Amanda Walsh reviewed the flight plan that would take them over the southwestern United States at 39,000 feet. Among the 180 passengers settling into their seats was a woman who looked completely ordinary in every way possible. Sarah Phoenix Chin, 34, wore simple blue jeans, white sneakers, and a plain gray sweatshirt as she made her way to seat 24F in the economy section. Her long black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she carried only a small backpack and paperback novel. To everyone around her, she appeared to be just another passenger heading home to Florida, perhaps a teacher or office worker taking a vacation. The flight attendants smiled politely as they offered her a pillow and blanket, treating her with the same routine courtesy they showed every passenger. What none of them knew was that Sarah Chin was actually Colonel Sarah Phoenix Chin, one of the most decorated fighter pilots in United States Air Force history. She had earned her legendary call sign Phoenix during the war in Afghanistan when her F-16 Fighting Falcon was shot down by enemy fire over hostile territory. Against all odds, she had survived the crash, evaded capture for 6 days, and guided rescue helicopters to her location using only a basic survival radio. When the rescue team finally reached her, she was still providing tactical intelligence about enemy positions in the area. Her ability to rise from what seemed like certain death had earned her the Phoenix name, and it stuck throughout her military career. The elderly man sitting next to her in 24E, retired businessman Frank Rodriguez, made polite conversation as the aircraft pushed back from the gate. "Flying home to Miami?" he asked pleasantly. "Yes, visiting family," Sarah replied with a friendly smile, never mentioning that she was actually traveling to MacDill Air Force Base for a classified briefing about future combat operations. Frank assumed she worked in one of the many tourist businesses in Miami, perhaps at a hotel or restaurant. He had no idea that the quiet young woman beside him had flown over 200 combat missions and had been personally decorated by 3 different presidents. As Flight 892 climbed through 25,000 feet over the Mojave Desert, Sarah opened her paperback romance novel and settled in for what she expected to be a routine flight across the country. She had deliberately chosen civilian clothes and economy seating to avoid any attention that might come with traveling in uniform or first class. After 15 years of military service, she had learned that sometimes the best way to travel was to blend in completely with the civilian population. Flight attendants moved through the cabin offering drinks and snacks, treating Sarah exactly like every other passenger, with no idea that she outranked most military officers they might ever meet. The first sign of trouble came at 10:47 a.m., exactly 2 hours and 15 minutes into the flight, when passengers felt the aircraft suddenly shudder and hear a loud bang from somewhere near the engines. Captain Sterling's calm voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've experienced a minor mechanical issue and will be descending to a lower altitude as a precaution. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." But Sarah's trained ear recognized something more serious in the captain's tone, and she noticed that the aircraft was descending much faster than normal for a routine altitude change. What passengers didn't know was that the left engine had suffered a catastrophic failure, sending metal fragments through the wing and damaging crucial flight control systems. Captain Sterling and First Officer Walsh were dealing with multiple warning lights, loss of hydraulic pressure, and control surfaces that were responding slowly to their inputs. The situation was rapidly becoming critical, but they tried to maintain calm while declaring an emergency with air traffic control and requesting immediate vectors to the nearest airport. At 10:52 a.m., the situation took a dramatic turn for the worse when the aircraft's autopilot disconnected and manual control became extremely difficult. The Airbus A330 began to roll uncontrollably to the left, and passengers screamed as they felt the aircraft bank sharply downward. Captain Sterling fought with the controls, but the damaged flight systems were making it nearly impossible to maintain level flight. "We're losing hydraulics fast," he called to First Officer Walsh. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this thing flying." In the passenger cabin, panic was beginning to spread as people realized this was no routine mechanical problem. Flight attendants struggled to maintain order while the aircraft continued its erratic flight path, rolling left and right as the pilots fought for control. Oxygen masks deployed from the ceiling as the aircraft's emergency systems activated automatically. Children were crying, adults were praying, and everyone aboard Flight 892 suddenly understood that their lives were in serious danger. That's when Sarah Chin made the decision that would save 180 lives. She unbuckled her seatbelt and made her way forward against the tilting deck of the aircraft, using her military balance training to navigate the unstable cabin. She approached the senior flight attendant, Maria Santos, who was trying to coordinate the emergency response while dealing with her own fear about the situation. "I need to speak with the pilots immediately," Sarah said in a calm but authoritative voice that cut through the chaos around them. "Ma'am, I need you to return to your seat," Maria replied, following standard procedure. "The pilots are handling the emergency." But Sarah's military command presence was unmistakable as she looked directly at the flight attendant. "I'm Colonel Sarah Chin, United States Air Force. I'm a fighter pilot with 15 years of experience. Those pilots need help right now, and I might be the only person on this aircraft who can provide it." Maria's eyes widened in shock as she realized the quiet passenger from seat 24F was actually a military officer. Sarah entered the cockpit at 10:55 a.m. to find Captain Sterling and First Officer Walsh struggling with an aircraft that was barely controllable. Sweat poured down their faces as they fought against control systems that were becoming increasingly unresponsive. Warning alarms filled the cockpit with urgent sounds, and multiple system displays showed red failure indications. "Captain, I'm Colonel Sarah Chin, Air Force fighter pilot," she announced. "I'm here to help in any way I can." Captain Sterling looked back at the young woman who had just entered his cockpit and felt a surge of hope. Military pilots were known for their ability to handle impossible situations, and right now he needed all the help he could get. "Colonel, this aircraft is barely flying. We've lost most of our hydraulic systems, the left engine is completely gone, and I'm not sure we can maintain control much longer. We're trying to make it to Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, but I honestly don't know if we're going to make it." Sarah quickly assessed the situation with the trained eye of a combat pilot who had faced life-and-death situations dozens of times. The Airbus A330's flight displays showed multiple system failures, but she could see that the pilot still had partial control through the backup systems. Her F-16 experience had taught her to fly damaged aircraft using unconventional techniques, and she began sharing those lessons with the airline crew. "Captain, in the military we call this flying broken. You have to use every system you have left and accept that normal procedures might not work." At 11:02 a.m., Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport declared a full emergency as Flight 892 approached their airspace. Emergency vehicles lined the runways, and air traffic controllers cleared all other aircraft from the area. But more importantly, the crisis had caught the attention of Luke Air Force Base, located just 20 miles west of Phoenix. The base commander, Brigadier General Patricia Williams, ordered 2 F-22 Raptor fighters to scramble and provide assistance to the civilian airliner in distress. The F-22s, call signs Viper 1 and Viper 2, launched from Luke Air Force Base within minutes and climbed rapidly toward Flight 892's position. Major Jake Hammer Thompson and Captain Lisa Stryker Martinez, both experienced Raptor pilots, established radio contact with Phoenix Approach Control to coordinate their assistance. "Phoenix Control, Viper Flight of 2 airborne from Luke. We're ready to provide escort and assistance to the emergency aircraft." Meanwhile, Sarah Chin was working with the airline pilots to develop an unconventional approach to Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. Her combat experience had taught her to think outside normal procedures when aircraft systems failed, and she was sharing techniques that most civilian pilots had never heard of. "We're going to use differential thrust between the remaining engine and the APU to help control our direction," she explained. "It's not in any civilian manual, but it's saved my life more than once in combat." As Flight 892 descended toward Phoenix, Sarah took over radio communications with air traffic control, freeing Captain Sterling and First Officer Walsh to focus entirely on flying the damaged aircraft. Her calm, professional voice impressed the controllers, who had never heard a passenger handle emergency communications with such competence. "Phoenix Control, Flight 892. We have partial flight control capability. Requesting straight-in approach to your longest runway with emergency equipment standing by." At 11:18 a.m., the F-22 Raptors established visual contact with Flight 892 and moved into escort formation alongside the damaged airliner. Major Thompson keyed his radio to report the situation to Phoenix Control. Phoenix Control, Viper 1 has visual on the emergency aircraft. Significant damage visible to the left wing and engine area. Aircraft appears to be under control but flying erratic flight path. That's when something extraordinary happened. The air traffic controller, Master Sergeant David Park, was a former Air Force enlisted man who had worked with fighter pilots for years before joining the FAA. When he heard Sarah's voice on the radio coordinating the emergency approach, something about her call sign and professional demeanor seemed familiar. He pulled up the military coordination database and cross-referenced the passenger manifest with active Air Force personnel records. What Master Sergeant Park found made him immediately contact Luke Air Force Base Operations. Luke Ops, Phoenix Control. You need to know that the passenger coordinating the emergency response on Flight 892 is Colonel Sarah Chin, call sign Phoenix. She's the Phoenix who survived the shoot-down in Afghanistan and has over 200 combat missions. The operations officer at Luke nearly dropped his radio when he heard the name. Phoenix was a legend throughout the fighter pilot community. Within minutes, the word had spread to the F-22 pilots flying escort. Major Thompson couldn't believe what he was hearing through his headset. Stryker, did you copy that traffic? The passenger helping fly that airliner is Phoenix. The Phoenix from Afghanistan. Captain Martinez, flying Viper 2, was equally amazed. No way, Hammer. Phoenix is like a ghost story we tell new pilots. Are you saying she's actually on that aircraft? Luke Air Force Base Operations confirmed the incredible news to the F-22 pilots. Viper flight, be advised the passenger assisting with emergency procedures aboard Flight 892 is confirmed to be Colonel Sarah Chin, call sign Phoenix. She is one of our most decorated combat pilots. The respect in the controller's voice was unmistakable. In the fighter pilot community, Phoenix was more than just a pilot, she was a living legend whose exploits were taught to new pilots as examples of courage and skill under fire. Major Thompson switched to the emergency frequency that Flight 892 was using and keyed his microphone with obvious reverence in his voice. Flight 892, this is Viper 1. Is that really Phoenix coordinating your approach? Sarah paused for a moment before responding, knowing that her anonymity was now completely blown. Viper 1, Phoenix confirms. Just trying to help get these folks home safely. The impact of that radio transmission was immediate and profound. Back at Luke Air Force Base, pilots and ground crews gathered around radio speakers to listen to their legendary colleague coordinating the rescue of 180 civilian passengers. At Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, air traffic controllers who had never heard of Phoenix suddenly understood they were witnessing something historic. Emergency responders on the ground realized that the damaged airliner had one of the most skilled pilots in military history helping to guide it to safety. Captain Martinez, flying Viper 2, could barely contain her excitement as she spoke over the radio. Phoenix, this is Stryker. It's an honor to fly alongside you, ma'am. The entire F-22 community knows your story. Sarah's response was typical of her humble nature. Stryker, the honor is mine. Now let's focus on getting this big bird on the ground in one piece. At 11:25 a.m., with Sarah Chin providing tactical coordination and the F-22's flying protective escort, Flight 892 began its final approach to Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport's runway 08, the longest runway available at 11,489 feet. Captain Sterling was amazed at how much easier the approach became with Sarah's military expertise guiding their unconventional flying techniques. Her combat experience with damaged aircraft was proving invaluable in keeping the Airbus A330 under control during the most critical phase of flight. The passengers in the cabin could see the F-22 Raptors flying alongside their aircraft through the windows, and many were taking photos and videos of the unprecedented escort formation. Frank Rodriguez, the elderly businessman sitting next to Sarah's now empty seat, suddenly realized that his quiet travel companion was actually the military pilot coordinating their rescue. He watched through the window as one of the most advanced fighter jets in the world flew wingtip to wingtip with their damaged airliner, knowing that Sarah Chin was somehow responsible for this incredible display of military support. Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport had never seen an emergency response like this one. Not only were all emergency vehicles positioned along the runway, but the military coordination had brought additional rescue helicopters and medical teams from Luke Air Force Base. The sight of F-22 Raptors escorting a civilian airliner created a dramatic scene that was being broadcast live on television news as cameras captured the historic approach. At 11:31 a.m., Captain Sterling executed a perfect touchdown on runway 08 with Sarah Chin continuing to provide tactical guidance until the aircraft came to a complete stop. The 180 passengers and crew aboard Flight 892 erupted in cheers and applause as they realized they had survived what could have been a catastrophic accident. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft immediately, but their services were not needed. Everyone aboard was safe and uninjured thanks to the extraordinary flying skills of the crew and the tactical expertise of their military passenger. As passengers began evacuating through the normal exit doors, many stopped to thank the pilots for their heroic efforts. But Captain Sterling and First Officer Walsh were quick to credit Sarah Chin with saving the aircraft. "That woman is the reason we're all alive," Captain Sterling told reporters who had gathered at the airport. "Without her military expertise and tactical knowledge, I honestly don't think we could have maintained control of the aircraft long enough to reach the airport." The F-22 Raptors performed a victory flyover of Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport before returning to Luke Air Force Base, where word of Phoenix's heroic actions had already spread throughout the entire installation. Base Commander Brigadier General Williams was waiting on the flight line when the Raptors landed, eager to hear first-hand accounts from the pilots who had flown alongside the legendary Phoenix during her civilian rescue mission. Major Thompson and Captain Martinez could barely contain their excitement as they described the mission to their commanding officer. "General, it was like flying with a legend," Major Thompson reported. "Phoenix coordinated that entire emergency approach with the same tactical precision we use in combat operations. She turned a potential disaster into a textbook rescue mission." Captain Martinez added, "Ma'am, I've been flying F-22s for 8 years, and I've never seen anything like the way Phoenix handled that situation. She's everything the stories say and more." Back at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, Sarah Chin quietly gathered her backpack and prepared to continue her journey to Florida, hoping to avoid the media attention that was beginning to focus on her role in the rescue. But her anonymity was permanently over. News organizations had already identified her as the military hero who had saved Flight 892, and her photograph was spreading across social media and television news programs around the world. Airport security provided Sarah with a private escort to help her avoid the growing crowd of reporters and photographers who wanted to interview the mysterious passenger who had helped save 180 lives. As she walked through the terminal, other travelers recognized her from the news reports and began applauding spontaneously. Children asked for her autograph, and military personnel in the airport saluted as she passed by. The story of Flight 892 became international news within hours, with headlines reading "Legendary Fighter Pilot Saves 180 Lives in Civilian Rescue," and "Phoenix Rises Again, Military Hero's Secret Flight Becomes Life-Saving Mission." Television news programs featured interviews with passengers who described how a quiet woman in jeans and sneakers had transformed into a commanding military officer when lives were on the line. Frank Rodriguez, the businessman who had sat next to Sarah during the flight, became a frequent interview subject for news programs. "She seemed like the most ordinary person in the world," he told CNN. "We talked about the weather and vacation plans. I had no idea I was sitting next to one of the most decorated pilots in military history. When I think about how calm and modest she was, even knowing what she was capable of, it just makes her actions even more incredible." The Air Force quickly arranged for Sarah to complete her travel to MacDill Air Force Base aboard a military transport aircraft, both to provide her with privacy and to ensure she could attend her scheduled classified briefing. But her role in saving Flight 892 had already made her one of the most famous military officers in the country, and her story would inspire countless future pilots to pursue careers in military aviation. Captain Robert Sterling and First Officer Amanda Walsh were awarded the FAA's highest civilian honors for their performance during the emergency, but they continued to insist that Sarah Chin deserved primary credit for the successful outcome. "We were trained to fly normal aircraft under normal conditions," Captain Sterling explained during an award ceremony. "Colonel Chin was trained to fly broken aircraft under impossible conditions. She brought skills to our cockpit that we simply didn't possess, and those skills saved everyone aboard." The Airbus A330 that served as Flight 892 was eventually repaired and returned to service, but not before the airline installed a commemorative plaque in the cockpit honoring all participants in the emergency. The plaque read, "In honor of Captain Robert Sterling, First Officer Amanda Walsh, and Colonel Sarah Phoenix Chin, whose courage, skill, and teamwork saved 180 lives on June 22, 2024. Their actions represent the highest traditions of aviation professionalism and military service." 6 months later, Sarah Chin was promoted to Brigadier General and assigned as the new commander of the Air Force's Elite Test Pilot School, where she would train the next generation of experimental aircraft pilots. Her first address to the new students included the story of Flight 892, emphasizing that military training created not just warriors, but citizens prepared to serve their communities whenever and wherever that service was needed. The skills we learn in uniform don't belong to us alone, General Chen told the assembled test pilots. They belong to every person we might be called upon to help, whether in combat or in the passenger seat of a civilian airliner. The true measure of our training is not what we can do for ourselves, but what we can do for others when they need us most. The aftermath of Flight 892 created lasting changes throughout both military and civilian aviation communities. The Federal Aviation Administration immediately began reviewing their emergency procedures to better identify and utilize passenger expertise during in-flight crises. Airlines started including questions about aviation backgrounds on their passenger registration forms, creating databases of qualified travelers who could assist during emergencies. The dramatic rescue proved that military training could save civilian lives in ways that nobody had previously imagined. Within days of the emergency landing, video footage of the F-22 escort formation had been viewed millions of times on social media platforms around the world. The sight of America's most advanced fighter jets flying alongside a damaged civilian airliner created powerful images that resonated with people everywhere. Comments poured in from viewers expressing amazement that such coordination was possible, and many credited Sarah Chen with orchestrating one of the most dramatic aviation rescues in modern history. The passengers of Flight 892 formed a special bond that lasted long after their emergency landing in Phoenix. Martha Williams, a grandmother from Orlando who had been traveling to visit her new grandchild, organized annual reunions for everyone who had been aboard the aircraft that day. "We're like a family now," she explained to local news reporters. "We all shared something incredible together, and Sarah Chen is the reason we're all here to talk about it." The reunions became celebrations of life, with passengers sharing updates about their families and careers while always remembering the woman who had saved them all. Frank Rodriguez, the businessman who had sat next to Sarah during the flight, became one of her strongest advocates in the civilian world. He established the Phoenix Foundation, a non-profit organization that provided scholarships for young women pursuing careers in military aviation. "Sarah showed me that heroes come in the most unexpected packages," Rodriguez said during the foundation's first fundraising dinner. "She was just a quiet passenger reading a book, but when we needed her most, she became our guardian angel." The Phoenix Foundation grew rapidly, attracting donations from aviation companies, military organizations, and grateful passengers from Flight 892. Within 2 years, the foundation had awarded over 50 scholarships to young women entering Air Force Academy, Navy flight training programs, and civilian pilot schools. Each scholarship recipient received a small pin shaped like a phoenix rising from flames, symbolizing the courage and determination that Sarah Chen had demonstrated during the emergency. General Patricia Williams, the Luke Air Force Base commander who had ordered the F-22 escort, was promoted to lead Air Combat Command partly based on her decisive actions during the Flight 892 crisis. In her new role, she implemented new training programs that taught military pilots how to assist civilian aircraft during emergencies. The Phoenix incident showed us that our responsibility to protect and serve extends beyond traditional military missions, General Williams explained to a Senate committee reviewing military aviation policies. The two F-22 pilots who had flown escort for Flight 892, Major Thompson and Captain Martinez, both received Distinguished Flying Crosses for their roles in the rescue mission. More importantly to them, they had flown alongside their hero and witnessed firsthand the leadership skills that had made Phoenix a legend throughout the fighter pilot community. "Flying with Phoenix was like flying with history," Major Thompson told Air Force Times magazine. She handled that emergency with the same tactical precision that saved her life in Afghanistan. Captain Martinez was selected for promotion to Major ahead of schedule, with her personnel file noting her exceptional performance during the civilian rescue mission. She often spoke at Air Force recruiting events, using the story of Flight 892 to illustrate how military training prepared pilots to serve their communities in unexpected ways. "When young people ask me why they should consider military aviation," Martinez explained, "I tell them about Phoenix and how her combat training saved 180 innocent lives in a single afternoon." The Airbus A330 manufacturer conducted an extensive investigation of the engine failure that had caused the Flight 892 emergency. Their final report credited the aircraft's design with providing enough backup systems to keep the plane flyable, but acknowledged that conventional civilian training might not have been sufficient to exploit those capabilities. The report specifically mentioned Sarah Chen's military expertise as a crucial factor in the successful outcome, leading to new training requirements for airline pilots worldwide. Boeing and Airbus both invited Sarah to consult on future aircraft designs, wanting to incorporate lessons learned from Flight 892 into their next generation of commercial aircraft. Her insights about flying damaged aircraft led to improved backup flight control systems and better pilot training programs that included military-style emergency procedures. Commercial aviation can learn a lot from military aviation, Sarah told a gathering of aerospace engineers. In combat, we assume everything will go wrong and train accordingly. The story of Flight 892 also inspired changes in military transition programs designed to help service members move into civilian careers. The Air Force began highlighting how combat skills could transfer to civilian emergencies, encouraging retiring pilots to consider careers in commercial aviation, emergency services, and aviation safety organizations. Sarah's heroic actions demonstrated that military training created citizens who were prepared to serve their communities long after their formal military service had ended. Television networks produced several documentaries about Flight 892, featuring interviews with passengers, crew members, and military personnel who had participated in the rescue. The most popular documentary, titled Phoenix Rising: The Flight 892 Miracle, won an Emmy Award for Outstanding Documentary Programming. Sarah reluctantly participated in the filming, emphasizing that the real heroes were Captain Sterling and First Officer Walsh, who had maintained control of a nearly unflyable aircraft while she provided tactical advice. The documentary included dramatic cockpit voice recorder footage that captured Sarah's calm professionalism during the emergency. Viewers could hear her coordinating with air traffic control, coaching the airline pilots through unconventional flying techniques, and maintaining perfect composure while 180 lives hung in the balance. Aviation experts who analyzed the recordings concluded that Sarah's military communication skills had been essential to the successful coordination of the complex rescue operation. 3 years after Flight 892, Sarah was invited to speak at the International Aviation Safety Conference in Geneva, Switzerland. Her presentation, titled Combat Skills in Civilian Emergencies, drew the largest audience in the conference's history. Pilots, engineers, and safety officials from around the world came to hear firsthand how military training had saved a civilian airliner. Her speech was simultaneously translated into 12 languages and was later published in aviation safety journals worldwide. During her Geneva presentation, Sarah emphasized that her actions aboard Flight 892 represented the collective training of thousands of military instructors, mechanics, and support personnel who had prepared her for combat operations. "I didn't save that aircraft alone," she told the international audience. "Every Air Force instructor who taught me emergency procedures, every maintainer who explained aircraft systems, and every fellow pilot who shared their experience contributed to what happened that day." The speech received a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes, with aviation professionals from around the world expressing their respect for both Sarah's heroism and her humility. Many attendees later said that her presentation had changed their understanding of how military and civilian aviation could work together to improve safety for everyone who flew. Sarah's promotion to Brigadier General was celebrated throughout the Air Force with unusual enthusiasm. Her change of command ceremony at the Test Pilot School drew attendees from across the military aviation community, including many pilots who had served with her in combat and others who simply wanted to meet the woman who had become known as the guardian angel of Flight 892. The ceremony featured a flyover by F-22 Raptors from Luke Air Force Base, with a lead pilot calling out "Phoenix Flight, mission complete," as they passed overhead. As the new commander of the Test Pilot School, Sarah implemented new training programs that emphasized the importance of adaptability and creative problem-solving under pressure. She often used the Flight 892 emergency as a case study, showing how the same skills that made pilots effective in combat could save lives in civilian emergencies. Her students, who included some of the most talented pilots from all military services, came to understand that their training carried responsibilities that extended far beyond their military duties. The Test Pilot School under Sarah's leadership became known for producing pilots who could handle any emergency with calm professionalism. Her emphasis on flying broken, operating damaged aircraft using unconventional techniques, became a cornerstone of the curriculum. Students learned not just how to test new aircraft, but how to save aircraft and lives when normal procedures failed. The training philosophy that Sarah developed at the school was eventually adopted by pilot training programs throughout the military. Frank Rodriguez's Phoenix Foundation continued to grow, eventually expanding beyond scholarships to fund research into aviation safety and emergency response procedures. The foundation sponsored studies on how to better identify and utilize passenger expertise during in-flight emergencies, leading to new protocols that were adopted by airlines around the world. Rodriguez often said that the foundation's work ensured that Sarah's heroic actions would continue saving lives for generations to come. Today, the story of Flight 892 is taught at military academies and civilian flight schools as an example of how different types of aviation training can work together during emergencies. The dramatic rescue demonstrated that military and civilian aviation, while operating in different worlds, share the same fundamental commitment to safety and the preservation of human life. Sarah's actions proved that the skills learned in military service create citizens who are prepared to serve their communities whenever and wherever that service is needed. Sarah Phoenix Chin continues to serve as one of the Air Force's most senior pilots, though she still prefers to travel in civilian clothes when not on official duty. Whenever she boards a commercial flight, airline crews now recognize her immediately, and passengers often approach to thank her for her service. Flight attendants always offer her upgrades to first class, which she politely declines, preferring to sit among the people she might one day need to help. Airport security provides discreet protection when needed, but Sarah insists on maintaining as normal a travel experience as possible. The legacy of Flight 892 extends far beyond that single dramatic day in June 2024. The emergency sparked changes in aviation safety, military training, and civilian emergency response that continue to save lives around the world. But perhaps most importantly, Sarah Chen's actions reminded everyone that true heroes often travel among us unrecognized, quietly going about their daily lives until the moment when their extraordinary skills and courage are needed most. In a world that often seems divided, the story of Flight 892 showed that when lives are on the line, the barriers between military and civilian, ordinary and extraordinary, simply disappear, leaving only human beings committed to helping one another survive and thrive.